我们今天很高兴有我们的荷兰在台办事处的谭静南谭代表，谭代表在家中跟各位观众致意。
All right. Well, Mr. Erwin Olaf, members of your team, Shirley, Kevin, Fiona, even though I don't see you, good day to all of you. Mr. Liao Renyi of the National Taiwan Museum of Fine Art, member of your team, and in particular, Chief Curator Mrs. Iris Huang, and of course, all the other colleagues. I was supposed to be in person at this wrap-up seminar, but this weekend is the first time that I'm going to have a business trip in the region, so I apologize for not being able to be there together with you physically. And I leave it in the good hands of my colleague Ulko Gartner for the official introductory words representing our office. I just wanted to mention here in person, online, that it was definitely a great honor to have been involved in Mr. Olaf's exhibition, Perfect Moment in Complete World, and Mr. Olaf's first feature exhibition here in Taiwan, if I'm not mistaken. It was an honor professionally representing the Netherlands, but it was also an honor and a pleasure personally being an avid fan of Mr. Olaf's work. I still remember when I participated in the opening ceremony in August a few months ago that I was almost literally blown away by Mr. Olaf's works. A very comprehensive exhibition of the work that he's done over the past decades. But I was also very much blown away by the presentation, the very professional presentation by the good colleagues of the National Taiwan Museum of Fine Arts. So I would like to thank all involved in this project. Thank you for allowing us to have been part of this beautiful project. Thank you so much. And I give the floor back to you in Taichung. Thank you so much.
首先是我们荷兰在台办事处的吴处长。
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to first of all welcome Mr. Olaf. I don't know if he is here already online, but he will be shortly. And secondly, I would like to thank and welcome Shirley den Hartog, who is also here today and flew all the way in from the Netherlands in Taiwan. And of course, a warm welcome for everybody here in the audience. Thank you for coming to see the exhibition and to attend this special talk for the exhibition supported by the office, and the exhibition with the title, of course, Perfect Moments in Complete World. As I'm sure you all know, that this is the first time Mr. Olaf was ever held a large-scale solo exhibition at a museum in Taiwan. And I am truly honored to say that our office was allowed to play a role in its realization. At the opening of the exhibition back in August, as Mr. Tielman just mentioned, Mr. Tielman described Mr. Olaf as an artist that needs no introduction. As the photographs you see in the gallery prove, his work truly speaks for themselves. He is not only one of the most important photographers in the world, but also deeply respected and loved back home in the Netherlands. Among Mr. Olaf's work, he is mostly well known for his portraits. The cinematic style he uses conveys a sense of outerworldness. Each of his photographs tells a unique story, but together they are even more powerful and give you a peek into the mental life and creative mind of the master at work. His photographs also convey Mr. Olaf's own sense of vulnerability, which he so gracefully shares with his audience. This is especially true when you look at his self-portraits. Even since the exhibition opened in August, we have been impressed by the number of visitors that have come to see the exhibition in person. At the opening ceremony, hosted by the museum, when we saw the exhibition ourselves for the first time, we were impressed by the hard work that the team of the National Taiwan Museum of Fine Arts had put in. Impressive grand entrance leading into the gallery space. and also the ceremony with a great speech by Dr. Liao, and of course, there was a recorded message from Mr. Olaf himself, for which the museum invited a string quartet from the National Taiwan Symphony Orchestra to give a short performance, and of course, by the different rooms in the gallery we were able to visit. With this exhibition, we also witnessed the fruitful collaboration between the National Taiwan Museum of Fine Arts and the Rijksmuseum, the National Museum of the Netherlands. On display in the galleries here, we see authorized replicas of paintings from the Rijksmuseum's collection, and they are assigned next to Mr. Olaf's photographs. At the Rijksmuseum's paintings have always been a great source of inspiration for him. Of course, we look forward to many more collaborations between museums in Taiwan and art institutions in the Netherlands in the future, and our office is happy to provide a platform for these kind of partnerships and many assistance in artists may need. Now, to look back at the guest of honor for this afternoon, Mr. Olaf. He's not only an artist, but also an activist and a champion for equal rights. He mentioned so much in the video recording he made for the opening. The work that he's done for the LGBTQI+ community, both in the Netherlands and abroad, is widely known by Dutch and international audience, and I hope that by mentioning this now, more people will begin learning about the important values of diversity, tolerance, and acceptance by Mr. Olaf also represents. In the work this far, I know that it's not always that we get to see the Netherlands represented abroad through the art as Mr. Olaf's stature. So again, I am truly honored to have been involved in bringing this exhibition to Taiwan. We encourage you all to take advantage of the rare opportunity later, ask the artist himself questions during the Q&A session after the discussion. Finally, I would like to take a chance once again to thank our partners at the National Taiwan Museum of Fine Arts. Without their dedication over the past year, when we first reached out to the museum, this exhibition simply would never have happened. First of course, Mr. Dr. Liao, Chief Curator Iris Huang, Curator Liao Xiaoyu, Assistant Researcher Kate Huang, and the rest of the team working behind the scenes, as well as the Ministry of Culture, the museum's partner agency. And thanks, of course, to the curators of the original exhibition at the Suwon Museum in South Korea. All good things must come to an end, so also this exhibition. But I found solace in the fact that the work will continue to travel all over the world to many more people to see. Thanks again and have a nice day.
接下来为各位介绍今天的讲者。首先是我们 Urban Olaf 工作室的总监 Shirley。
Then first let me introduce myself. My name is Shirley den Hartog. I work more than 25 years with Erwin Olaf together. People in our world call us, he's the Erwin, I'm the Olaf. He's the artistic part and I'm the financial part, so I earn the money, he spends it. So that's a little bit our connection. But next to working already for more than 25 years, we found this path, which we really enjoy to, conquer the world, we sometimes say, and try to find a place in the world for Erwin's art. The first time I reached out to the Dutch embassy here was because Erwin really had a special feeling for Taiwan. Friends of ours got married to gay men in Taiwan, and I think for us symbolized a little bit how we would see the new world, the LGBTQ. I always go on this world gay movement. I think we're making steps forward, and I think also through Erwin's work we hope to find new audience and for acceptance. So after speaking to the Dutch embassy, we were very grateful that this museum, was happy to host this exhibition. I want to thank all of you, but I cannot pronounce all your names, so thank you in general. And I think Erwin has a lung disease. He was really, really hoping to come, but he had a COVID and his lung condition went down and down, so he will join later on. So I thought I would show his work through my perspective a little bit. So it will be a little bit different than his story, because I'm on the other side of the studio. So I will do a bit of presentation. Sometimes I go slow, sometimes I go fast. I hope the translators can catch me. If not, I will hear if I go too fast. So more than 40 years ago, Erwin started to be on the School of Journalism. And he really wanted to be the best journalist of the Netherlands. Then he wrote his first paper, and then he just had a little article in the newspaper, and that was it. He said, well, I'm not going to get famous being a journalist. So then his teacher said, well, I think you should do the photography, and because a photo will last forever. So that was his first starting point. Oh, yes. Well, if they start to fix it, I will already explain what you will see. You have to understand that our country in the 80s was really a period which a lot of changes. There were many demonstrations. There were people were fighting for the rights for their sexuality, for their possibility to live, that you have a house, and it was a really anarchistic period. Erwin first started to making shots of all the demonstrations. That was, his teacher told him, go on the streets, get to know the people, convince people to trust you. I think that's his first connection, how he got to know how to work with models and actors. Because if you treat them equally, like he learned during all the demonstrations and all this journalistic photography period, you get more out of your models. So with this in his mind, he went also, he was a huge fan of going out, so he conquered the nightlife of Amsterdam, and he started to learn people that he didn't know from the little village he was from. All colored people, all sexuality, all different political backgrounds. And he felt like the nightlife and the fight for demonstration brought people together that at his little village he never saw all together. So he got really fascinated by this attitude of people, and he brought them into his first studio. And he made a series called Squares, and it was all about celebrating the individuality. So everybody is special. Doesn't matter if you're old or young. And that work got picked up by our art scene. And it was the first time like models with mentally illness and with other kind of figures came in the museum. So he did in the son of our prime minister at that time has a mentally illness, and then he made a series of mentally ill people, and the prime minister opened the exhibition, and it was for the whole community of the mentally diseased and the families a big step forward, that you could also work with people as models and not as objects. So I think that was his fascination, and some people thought it was more rebellious, because they said, well, why should you make photos of these people? Are you taking advantage? But in his whole career, he kept on giving a higher platform to models that's not in general models. So he did then a series Chessmen, which I would love to show you, but it's not on in this exhibition. And that was the first time he got European recognition of and he won the first prize of the Young European Photography. He got, and then he got an amount of money, and that he thought, well, what should I do with money? And from that moment on, he thought, if I earn money, I will spend it in my own work. In all this period, at 25 years, I gave him his salary. He never asked for more, because he doesn't care about money. He always invests in his own art, which I think after 40 years is still what we do at our studio. We don't need big cars, but we want to express. I think I will just do it like this. Maybe it's okay. It's okay. I think later on you will see more images. And then the 90s came, and Erwin had this really rough signature, and they called him like the rebel of photography in Europe. And then the advertisement companies, they wanted to work with him because of this image. So we did big campaigns for diesel jeans, for Microsoft, for Bottega Veneta, and because of this image, which brought us, from our little country, we went abroad, we went to New York, to Paris, and that was the first time we started traveling more and more, and finding also the way of how you express the in-between commercial work and, there's Erwin already. I don't know if he hears me. Hello.
Hello.
So then we started to travel more to other countries for jobs, and for later more and more exhibitions. My presentation is not working, my PDF, so I'm doing it by my voice. So then you know.
Oh yeah.
Another 10 minutes, then your turn. At a certain point, we after all this commercial work, we came back to the studio, and then there was a big happening in the world, 9/11, what had a great impact on Erwin, and later on also in his work. For 9/11, the Twin Towers, I assume you know all what happened. There was a little voice in our country saying that the Americans and the Western world had now finally got their own, that it was their own fault. Like there were all too much appearances of the states all over the world, which Erwin really disliked. He said, well, I'm so happy with my freedoms, my freedom of speech, my freedom of dance, my freedom of being. I have to tribute to the states to express that I don't feel like that. So he started out a series, and the work title was Happy. And when we started shooting the series Happy, we casted all people, American look-alike people, and then every photo has freedom of speech, freedom of dance, freedom of politics. And Erwin, during this session, he came to me with all these Polaroids. Then we shot analog, and he said, "Well, I feel so bad because this is not how I feel." And then the people were all standing still, and they were all the moment was freezed. And he said, "Well, this is what I want to say. The world we know before 9/11 is not there anymore." So the series Hope and Rain and Hope are in this exhibition. So if you have time later, you can watch it, and then you can see that his comments on the world's problems at that moment. After that, we got the series Grief, and then how will the world react? We were all freezed. What will happen? Everybody was standing with a tear, but not. It didn't react that much as what we thought. That was after Grief. He thought, well, we do everything set building, everything you see in the photos. We have a huge sets. We work with 30, 40 people for set building. And then he said, well, this is the maximum I can go with the sets. And we have to take a little bit distance from our own work. At that moment, there was in our country, yes, Johannes Vermeer Prize. It's the most prestigious prize for the arts. And Erwin got that prize after Grief. And one of the points they said, you have to spend this money you earn to do a series abroad. So we thought, should we do set building in studios abroad? And I don't feel like it anymore because I feel Europe is really changing. And I think my presentation is back. I hope. And at that point, it was 2013, Erwin got really, a bit depressed, I must say so. He felt like there was the democracy in our part of the world was in danger. You had all the populist people who reacted to 9/11, but you had also from the eastern Russia. We felt like Europe was changing. And then he said, well, if I have to do a series abroad, I want to do it in Berlin. because I feel there's the big change in the European democracy, and I want to. He feels like it's we were in an interbellum, like the same as we had before the Second World War, the period just a few years before the World War. That he was afraid that Europe will change in the coming time. So it was my task then to go to Berlin and to find all locations that were important during the in the 10 years before the Second World War. So I'm gonna go down. If I will go really quick. His first photos, what I just said about the journalism photography. I do this just 2 minutes, so then you maybe. And it was a really liberal time where you could be nude on the streets and like, well, you could really express yourself in this in 80s. So that's this was his youth, his starting point. And then he brought all the people he met. This is like the first drag contest in our country. He made photos there. And this was in our nightclubs. So the first house parties, he was there. He's shooting there now. You see him himself. So this is a little bit where his background, where he came from. And then the first, he thought he made a really beautiful photo. And then when he was in the dark room, he saw this man in the middle. And then he says, I hate going on location. I cannot control anything. So at that moment, he decided to go into the studio. So this is his first self-portrait in the studio. But this is then his inspiration, of this first series he made in the studio, with all the people he met during the nightlife he brought to the studio. So I think. And then, well, these two are in this exhibition. And in the 80s, he started out doing the ladies' hats. One of the pictures is here. And this is his fascination of light on skin, but also about what defines you as being feminine or masculine. And even by posing or putting a lady's hat on somebody's head, you can tell a story without words. So I think this is a series he continues doing. So these are from the 80s. But like, for example, these are the boys he just, or men he met now and brought to our studio. So also how men look like in our country in the 80s and now, well, because of love, people are changing the skin tones and, well, you get all these beautiful people because of love. Well, this was his inspiration of Siri Chessman. Am I going too fast, or is it okay that I show you this? Okay. So this is the series he won the big award of, and his launch to the art world. And this the series of the mentally diseased people I was mentioning. And after this was our first big consignment. This was the moment I started working for Erwin in 1979. And because of his image, they asked him to do, well, photos like this on the edge. This won all the prizes in Cannes on the advertisement awards. So then we got a lot of commissioned work. And with the money he earned from that series, he decided to do a series, a tribute to elderly, because he thought it's not nice to make fun of elderly, but you have to give them what they're worth. He became 40 this year, and he wanted to do a tribute on getting elderly. This is my mother-in-law on the right side, so there you know. I wish I looked like that later, or now. And this is the series that, is ode on digital manipulation. End of the 90s, it was really, everybody was doing it. And he said, well, I want to do it once really good in my own work, and then I give it a rest, because it's another pencil you use than photography. So this is my story about 9/11. And this was his inspiration, Norman Rockwell, well, the famous painter of America. We went to an exhibition before 9/11 to Norman Rockwell, and we thought it was so beautiful, the romance of that period. This is a photo of Erwin himself when he was young, and his mother sitting on the Christmas tree. And then later you see he uses his own experiences to show in his own photos. And for us, well, maybe it's nice, well, I don't have enough time, but every photo has like, he always makes mood boards up front, and like from the art or from he loves news, so every photo you see has a critic, what is from his news, or where he's angry about, or what he's fascinated about. For Erwin, I was, my PDF is now working, so I'm speeding it up. I did already the story, and now I'm showing the images, so then you know. Well, this is the starting point from the series I just was starting to talk about, the Berlin series. So I found all the spaces together with Erwin to do the shootings in Berlin, and Erwin made a mood board and was all inspired about well, the art of the interbellum, what I was just mentioning, and all the events, what happened during the interbellum, like the first dark-skinned man who won all awards. Well, the second part of the triptych, what is also here in the museum, is about Shanghai. We got invited to come to Shanghai several times, and when Erwin got invited for the first time, there was a photography fair. He was the main artist, and it was our first time when we came to China. Our European way of looking at China, well, we have our thoughts about China, but when we came there, we felt like it was really a bubbling city. Everything was, it was like young, like a young New York. And Erwin said, well, I really want to go back and do something with my idea about China. And during all our preparations, which got, we started to look, learn people, and all the women we worked were really strong women, single women. And then we started to hear their stories, like they used to live in the city of Shanghai, but because of the rebuilding and all the big flats, they didn't know their neighbors anymore. They couldn't go home because they couldn't travel up and down to Shanghai, and they felt really, really lonely. And Erwin really wanted to translate that loneliness of what happens if your city grows and grows, and that well, the individual doesn't have any space there anymore. So it was a big experience we had in Shanghai. And here in the exhibition, you also see the two video installations of the woman. And I think if you have time to go back again, they're saying words that for us was really difficult to translate to Chinese, like listen to me or hear me, because there are emotions we know as European very well, but we don't know the emotions you have in China or wherever in the world. So for us, it was a good learning point. And after going to Shanghai, Erwin said, oh, I really want to do something in the States. And he got really inspired by Gordon Parks, the photographer. But he said he didn't want to do a negative story. Trump was just getting elected. And he said, well, I don't want to make photos from a negative point of view. So then he was asked in Palm Springs to do a lecture, and then he went to Palm Springs, and he called me, I think even when he was in Palm Springs, that he was so surprised about all the hardworking people, and also what he saw on the streets, because I mentioned it already before, because of love, all the mixed people, he said they were so beautiful, and but it's also strange because Palm Springs in our mind was like this lush, beautiful place, and now due to climate change, he found a space where there were, well, all the electricity, windmills, but also the burns were really there, the fires, and there was a country changing because of climate. So he wanted to do something with this climate change, but also with what happens with love and with the individual, and how we place ourselves within this world. So I think the part we find that the rich people, they live in all these communities with big high walls, and the poor people lived on the streets and outdoors. So if you see the series here now in the exhibition, you will see the difference between the poor and the rich, I hope, and Erwin's fascination about it. Like example, this photo is like a quote of David Hockney, and then you see how it was before and now how it changed with the climate change. Well, I think you already mentioned the Rijksmuseum, so I will do that very fast. But when Erwin became 60, the Rijksmuseum, our biggest and most important institute of our country, wanted to collect Erwin's all oeuvre, which was a big compliment. So we had to give, of course, a lot, but they bought also a lot. And they, on his birthday, they make this exhibition. Well, what you see here with replicas, what was the most complimented exhibition. I think an artist can get. And there's a film here of Taco explaining why he thinks Erwin tells the same use the same language as our Dutch masters. Also on his birthday, he became knight, so from the Dutch government. So you can say sir to him later on. And after that, he was also asked to do the official portraits of our king and queen, which I think I just mentioned you that we do commission. We don't do it that much anymore, but for our king and queen, he made an exception. So they should be happy, I think. And this is a more private commission they gave Erwin as a gift when our king became 50. His wife, Queen Maxima, wanted to give him a gift. So first, the first portraits were made, and then later, the king was also portrait. So this is a new way of showing the royal family. A series that's here also on show is what we did during COVID. I think, hearing now the stories how it's like in Taiwan, I think in our country we were lucky that we got more freedom. But at that moment, it was the first week we were in lockdown. We were all really nervous like everybody else. And I think Erwin's, instead of sitting at home and being nervous and angry or whatever, he felt the need to make a series. And that was the first time we worked a little bit like a guerrilla. We just put everything in a van, went to locations without permission up front, and just in between documentary how the world was at that moment, and Erwin's fantasy, like you saw in all his pictures. So this was what he did in the first week of the lockdown. This is our studio. So we just redone our studio to make a really nice new year, and then we had to close down it again. So I'm happy this set was used for something. And this is the last series I want to talk about. I'm just going to look at the time. Am I still okay as of time, or should we 10 minutes? Or should I give Erwin already because he's waiting? Then he can talk about in Wild himself. Yeah. I think that will be better. Should I give you about this series? I think he can talk better about it.
那我们掌声欢迎 Erwin Olaf.
I think that Shirley introduced my work perfectly, but I'm a photographer, or the last 10 years I consider myself more as an artist using photography, but I'm as an instrument to express myself. But I'm educated in the 70s and 80s as a journalistic photographer. I studied at the School of Journalism, where I discovered very quickly that I didn't like writing that much.
I was wondering if you want to continue with Shirley's presentation in talking about Imwald, or do you want to start over
No, you prepared some questions, so
yes,
let's go to there, and then maybe we can go later.
Yeah,
That's involved, if you prefer.
Sure, I have some questions for Imwald as well. So,
So yeah, let's do it then.
yeah, I do have a PowerPoint with some of the images. I think I gave them my file, but I just want to double check. Yeah, because I'm going to mention some of the works. So, but I'm not going to use them right now. So I'll just start from the beginning. Is that okay?
For me, perfect.
Okay, all right. So thank you, Shirley, for giving us such an interesting, exciting introduction of your background, right? And so with this exhibition, I think a lot of audience really enjoyed the comparisons between your work and the Dutch masters. And so, and we understand that you had a journalistic background and you aspired to be a journalist early on, and then you had this really intense photographic style, like in the style of Ouija. But I was wondering, because you mentioned that early on in your childhood, you were very much influenced and you had easy access to the artworks at the Rijksmuseum. So I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about, do you remember the moment of your artistic awakening? Like, when did you?
Oh, that was not that early, huh?
Yeah. Okay.
I never thought I would be an artist. It was more that the curiosity, let's say so. As a young child, you know, with school, you go sometimes to the museum to get educated. And I remember that one time we went to the Rijksmuseum when I was about 8 or 9 years old, 10 maybe. And then I was not so struck by the Night Watch, which is our national treasure, a real big painting. But in the same room, there was this really small self-portrait of Rembrandt van Rijn, you know, as a young man. And what struck me was that it was so small and that it was also so emotional. You know, as a young child, you cannot really define what you think or what attracts you. But coming back more often later in my life, I always was attracted to this little painting. And later as photographer, I was struck by the fact that the most important thing, the face, was hidden in the shadow. So that was for me, you know, a riddle and also a starting point to discover the world of art, let's say so.
Thank you. But why, at the end, why did you choose photography as your main medium instead of, for example, painting or sculpture? I understand that you
No, well, you know, I can tell you, because I didn't consider myself as being an artistic person. In the high school, you know, you have to make a choice which school or which university you go later. But I was rather, you know, shy, you know, about what to do with the rest of my life. I was very insecure. And then, so I said to one of the deacon, I said, when he asked me, what do you want to become later in life? And then I said, I don't know. I wanted to become an actor, but I didn't dare to say so. And then he said, you're rather good in writing, so why don't you go to the School of Journalism? So he handed me over, let's say, a leaflet about this school. In this period of time, 1977, there was only one school of journalism in our country. And it said, to become a real independent journalist, it's for us important that you leave your parents' home and live on your own in the city of the school, you know. And I wanted to leave our home already 1 or 2 years, because I was quite rather rebellious. So I said to my parents, I would love to go to that school. But once when I was at that school, I started to discover that I was not so much attracted to writing. I was very much attracted to the independence and to the freedom. So one of the teachers, he saw me being rather unhappy. And then he said, maybe you should try photography, journalistic photography. And as soon as I touched the camera, which I still remember was a Nikon FM, I was hooked. I fell in love, you know, with the technique of photography, the cropping of the world, the printing in black and white, the developing of the film, you know, everything that counted up to a photograph. So this is the start of my photography, and it's not an artistic start. It is more a practical start, you know, and then it gave me, you know, an idea, oh, I can become a journalistic photographer. And don't forget that in the beginning of the 80s, I don't know if that was in your country, but there was a huge amount of unemployment, especially with young people. So I became volunteer for the gay movement and started to photograph big demonstrations and protests of squatters, now riots, you know. And that was the start of this, my professional career, but still not an artistic one. But doing it, you know, I discovered that reality I consider as very important in daily life, but not for my emotional life, you know. So already soon I started to start a little studio and to photograph the people I met during nightlife or during activities in the day, you know, and to ask them to model for me. So that was the start of my, let's say, discovering of photography as an instrument to express your inner world and to form or to manipulate reality with a camera, you know, and to express yourself and your imagination by the use of in the beginning black and white photography and later on color photography.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, we can really see that in the shift from a very straightforward and rough style into this more colorful and studio-produced, really finesse style of photography. I guess that it is the straightforward style that can't really satisfy your artistic tendency, I think. Thank you for that. And then, but everyone who first encountered your known photographic works noticed this high level of finesse, you know, in the production, in the photographing itself, in the post-production. And I'm curious about this level of finesse. Does it have to do with your training or your encounter with commercial work, or is it a common? Is it common in Dutch photography or in Dutch visual culture in general? No.
No, I don't think so. No, it really has to do with first with my own personality. You know, that is if I close my eyes and imagine an image or a story or an atmosphere that I want to photograph, then it's always a nearly perfect world with a crack in it, but a hidden crack, and it doesn't. And because I'm also partly educated by the world of advertising, I really like to use those tools to pull you as a viewer into my world, you know. So I like to seduce you with perfection, and as soon as you are in my imagination or in my photograph or in my series of photographs, I hope you feel this uncomfortable emotion, let's say so, of a perfect world, you know. Because me, myself, you know, always when I'm in a perfect circumstances, I start to feel uncomfortable, and it gives me reason to look behind the curtains to see what's wrong, you know, because I think suffering in a perfect world is rather painful, you know, or it can give you extra tension. And that is what I also want to show in my work.
Okay, yeah, that pretty much answers my next question, because as much as your photographs are so rich in color, you're like a master of color and lighting, but the colors and the lightings that are both really, really subdued. And then it creates this really restrained ambience in your work, like from the surface level to the psychological level. And then I wonder if the reason why you choose this mode of expression is because of what you just said.
And I have to add something to that, you know, what you see a lot in the general photography as an art, that what we see in museums most of the time is documentary photography. And it looks like since, you know, when I started out in the beginning of the 80s, there was maybe only a handful of photographers that started to discover that you could use photography also as an art form, and not only to publish in magazines or an advertisement or making portraits for famous people. But they, like a photographer like Robert Mapplethorpe, who was big and still is a big example for me, you know, and his photography was on the highest level of perfection in my opinion. But in the beginning, so I started to look at that school, and I was influenced a lot by that school of photography. But from the end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, let's say the German school, the Bergerschule, was getting the most dominant group of photography in art world, you know. But I didn't feel a connection with that. And I also thought later on in the 90s and beginning of the 2000s, that the endless repetition of documentary photography, in which you always have to see loose ends or cracks in the wall, that it had become kitsch. You know, the funny thing is that this idea of me, that I thought that it was becoming kitsch, many people from the beginning were looking at my work and saying, oh, his world is so perfect, it looked like kitsch. So, but I want to work with those elements of kitsch or fake, you know, to pull you into my world, like advertising is doing, and then slap you in the face with my emotions or with the hidden secrets in the photography.
Okay, so that's why you have a high preference of stage photography. So you can.
No, I don't have a high preference. It is me. Okay, it's me. It's my personality. It's my character. I cannot do differently. It's who I am.
Okay.
And I cannot make something. I think no artist can do that. And nobody also in other professions is work with a lie, you know, with the element that's not me, you know. So when, let's say, a talent is coming on the set and the hair is not done like I imagine it, you know, when I was making my idea, when I was developing my idea, then it has to be changed, because otherwise I'm only looking at the bad hair day of the talent.
Okay, I see. That's fair.
Yeah. Okay. One has to follow his heart, you know.
Sure. So maybe it's a good time we start talking about specific artworks. Yeah.
Perfect.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So maybe you can. This is for the next. Okay. Yeah. So Shirley mentioned a little bit of your encounter with America and how you observed there's this hope of happiness and then the freedom of speech, which you which you found out later is kind of a fake facade, and then you were kind of disappointed, and so then you in turn you created this Rain, Hope, and Grief, this kind of these works, right? And then I can't help but notice that in these works, the overall atmosphere really resembles the look of the 1950s and 60s America. Yeah, and then, so I was wondering if there's a specific reason that you are drawn to this era and the look of it and not other times.
Yeah, well, I think then I have to go back to my own use as well. Because, but first, let's say the first time I thought I want to do something with the United States as a country was when we had the Twin Towers, the two airplanes flying into the Twin Towers and this attack on the United States. Because everybody was, of course, shocked, but you also heard little voices of people saying it's good that it happened, you know, also even in the Netherlands. And that made me quite angry because I always had the idea that without the United States, Europe would have lost the Second World War, you know. And the Second World War, by winning it, it gave us the freedom of speech, and it gave us the enormous amount of richdom that started after this period, this awful period. So, and my own use started in the late 50s, beginning of the 60s, in which the United States had a highlight in its richdom, but also in its design, in its fashion, in its cinema, etc., you know, so it influenced us in Europe a lot. And my parents were not really art educated. So they only had the book of Rembrandt, they had one book of Van Gogh, and they had a book of the American illustrator artist Norman Rockwell. And as a child, I loved really the pictures of Norman Rockwell because they were romantic and they painted a beautiful world of the United States as let's say a paradise with a humoristic touch. So when I wanted to make kind of rather political series about the United States to express my feelings about this terrible attack on the free world, let's say so, I started to think I have to make something that's very happy. So I called the series already Happy, and that was the beginning of Rain. But when I was making it, it turned out that this world didn't exist anymore, you know? So when we had built the first set, which was the most expensive series of photographs I was starting to make, because set building is very expensive. And I started on the first day and it looked really awful. Let's say this happy kind of world. Because I realized it doesn't exist anymore. It's gone. So at a certain moment, when I was getting more and more angry and panicking, I asked everybody in the scene not to move, not to think, and just to stand. And I still remember that I made a Polaroid. I was still working with film, and in this Polaroid there was something happening, because everybody looked defeated, but there were 4 people. And I showed it to Shirley, and she said, well, maybe this is a good start. Because I said, what do you think, you know? And I sent it away 2 of the talents, 2 of the models. And then I started to work with 2 other models, you know? And then I discovered that we were, for the whole Western world at that moment, and me also very much, that I tried to photograph the moment we were in all together. And that was the moment between action and reaction. So let's say, as a photographer, I'm a little too late when I push the button, or a little too early, exactly in this moment between action and reaction. And I can give you an example. Let's say your husband says to you, I don't love you anymore, or I'm going to divorce. And I push the button just at the moment in between your reaction and his words. So this is how I thought our world was at that moment also. So that is what you can see in rain, hope, and grief. And grief is, let's say, just that I photograph just 1 second later. So the beginning of a reaction.
Wow, so that brings me to your directing style. So how do you, can you talk a little bit about how you direct the actors, and then how you kind of control, so to speak, or maybe trigger their emotions, even though in your images, the emotions are very, very much non-visible. If visible at all, it's still very, very subtle. So how do you design this, and how do you control it to the level that you expect?
Well, most of the time, I don't know the actors or the talents or the models that good, Of course, you have a talk up front and you do the casting. But then mostly during the day that I'm doing the shooting, I have a long talk, about who they are and what the situation is they are in during my shoot or in my story, And you have to imagine that I'm not really democratic, because, but every talent has to start to find the emotion in itself, where I'm looking for, But during the shoot, I think one of the things I try to learn or to see or to discover until the day of today is what is the choreography of our body, of our emotions. So let's say in dance, you have a choreography, but in our movements, when we are, let's say, in social life, we also have a choreography, because let's imagine you are watching people in the street. I think 9 out of 10 emotions you can read from a distance. You see a man and a woman fight, quarreling, You see a boy and a girl, and the boy is unhappy, walking next to his girlfriend because something she has said, How comes that we can see that? How comes that we can see at perfect strangers what more or less they think or what their emotion is? Is that a little centimeter pushing down your shoulders, or lifting up your nose, or your eyelids, or the roundness of your eyes, or the beginning tear, or your chin bowed down? There are so many tiny little movements that count up to the emotion we express. And that, I think, is super interesting. Because when an elephant is watching us, he only thinks human being, as we think only elephant. But when another human being is watching us, most of the time he or she can read a little bit in what kind of emotion we are. And I think that is part of my research already for 20 years.
Okay, thank you. So is this subtlety in this expression and the stillness in your photography like a way to draw us closer to your images and allowing us to discover these emotions on our own?
Yeah, that's absolutely the goal. If you look at my career, you can see that I was educated for a long time by, let's say, commercial photography. First theater and movie posters, and later advertising. And what advertising is doing, it's telling you what to think. You know, come to my movie, you know, watch my product, buy my product. That is a little bit what advertising is doing. So till 2001, I think I was quite dictating in my emotions, saying to you, I'm angry, look at me, you know, or look at this model, see my world, you know. But at a certain moment, it became boring for me. So I have to say that that because I started to get bored with my own work, I wanted to be more open and free and tell you not anymore what to think, but more start a travel in your own mind and to discover your own stories and your own emotion, you know. So that's and that started really good with series Rain, and after, later Hope, and after that Grief, and then continued till the day of today.
Thank you. Let's move on to your trilogy, shall we? Of
Yes,
the
please.
3 cities. Maybe you can. Oh, wait. I thought this was supposed to be the last slide. If you go back to the one after Grief, the one after 那个刚刚室内的那个的下一张 or if you can like 还是你要跳出来再 yeah these 3. Okay, so about trilogy, we understand how it started, right? It started from this prize that you won, and then the condition is you have to produce something abroad. But I was curious about how do you connect these 3 segments within this trilogy, conceptually and aesthetically?
How I connect them? There's no connection.
There's no connection.
There are only cities that fascinated me because of cities in a world that is in transition and how they react on it. You have to imagine that Berlin was for a long time, let's say, a poor city with no influence at all. But in the last 20 years, or 25 years, it became more and more the center of Europe and the heart of democracy in Europe, you know, and freedom. So for me, that was the starting point because I fell in love with the city and wanted to, but I also knew about its history and the dark side of it, and I wanted to do something with that, you know. So celebrating the new emotion and the transition from a, let's say, a provincial city that was destroyed after the Second World War, and therefore more and more provincial till the rebirth of it. Same goes for me for Shanghai, although the recent years, I think there was a big change, but when we came there the first time, I felt it was so dynamic and so new and so growing, and people, young people, were experimenting with their little piece of freedom, you know, and gave a lot of new energy that I thought I have to photograph this because the new energy also destroyed a lot, and there was a hidden sadness. And then later we went to, I was in Palm Springs, which is close to LA. But LA, I thought, is a little bit used too much. And I thought Palm Springs was far more inspirational for me. And that was a city, let's say, more or less in decline. Because coming back a little bit to why did I photograph so much in this American mid-century style. Well, that was very visible and is very visible in Palm Springs. It's the design, architecture, hairstyles, clothing, you name it, of the United States was on his peak, in the mid-50s, especially also in Palm Springs. But the last 25 years, it's more and more in decline, and the climate change, and you have this city in the middle of the desert, and you don't understand, because it's totally artificial. So, but all those cities were, for me, the moment I visited them and photographed there, cities in transition, moving from A to B. And that was fascinating for me.
Okay, yeah. Well, I guess it's you can almost say that it's by chance that you, I don't mean it in any negative way, but it's like you stumbled upon these three cities.
Yeah, exactly. That's the right word.
Okay, but
there's not a big plan,
Right.
It's more a basic emotion. As soon as you are somewhere, it triggered something in my imagination, in my energy as an artist, and then I thought I want to do something with this, because also the traveling, it's the traveling over the world. You see so much, you learn so much that that I wanted to translate it in my personal experience into this photo series.
Yeah, but I think what really connects these three locations is really inside you, is what you observed of humanity or modernization or globalization in general, and how like human civilization is really progressing in a way that shows this. I think there is a strong relationship, coexistent of hope and despair in all three cities and all three histories or cultures that you have chosen. Yeah. And if I may share a little bit of my own observation, I think it's you from this Rain, Hope, and Grief series and about America, and then to this trilogy. I feel like you really draw a focus on this relationship between what I said, just hope and despair. And in Berlin, it's almost like there is this, it's like all three cities, it's the despair is a result of false hope, or false promises. And in Berlin in particular, it's like there's this false promise of being free of the trauma of the wars, because you've chosen this like interwar period, and then in Shanghai is like realizing that this prosperity and equality cannot coexist at the same time. And then in America, it's like there's this promise of safety and happiness, but then in reality, there's this actual decline happening and this internal conflict in their society. So I think maybe because you are drawn to these qualities, and then that's what really maybe, I don't know, in my opinion, connects these three segments in your trilogy.
Thank you very much.
Oh,
you make it more intellectual. No, but what you are doing now, what you're saying now, I'm so happy with that, because it is more or less my goal, because let's say I'm not such an intellectual person, but I love to start dialogue with the viewer, and to feed me with his or her knowledge, and to give me feedback on the works, because I do a lot on just my primarily emotions, and I'm not so intellectual, it's just more that you come somewhere and you feel something and think, I have to do something with this emotion. And I still remember that Shirley said it as well, we were in Shanghai, and that we were so, let's say, touched by our encounters with the people that were living there, you know, the individual conversations. And then you have this huge city of 20 million people, you know, but 20 million people are 20 million individuals. And I wanted to go into that individuality, you know. Same goes also within other stories, but the same goes also in the Palm Springs, you know. And then in the German, say, Berlin series, you know, I focus more on the young children as grown-ups, you know. So every time I found my own kind of approach, you know, for every story. But the main thing is that I love to hear that I invite you to go into the world that I create, and then you react on that, you know. And then I get, because you teach me again. And that I love.
You're being very humble. Yeah. Well, since we're on the topic of a trilogy, I want to ask you specifically a question about the Shanghai series. Because I realize that Shanghai is the first location outside of the West.
Yes.
If that's true. Okay, so did you, because your style, your photographic style, the style of your image is pretty consistent. And then did you have to adjust for the cultural differences when you were shooting for Shanghai?
Maybe I had to, but I didn't. But well, if you look at the Shanghai series, you know, especially because it's a little layer in the whole series, but the greenness of the light, you know, many of the pictures have a touch of green, because that was one of the things that surprised me, or that I discovered when I was in Shanghai, that in many places there is a green atmosphere in the light, you know. It's maybe the use of the TL or you know, that. So that was it. Then the casting, you know, because, you know, you come from a very different cultural background. Let's say my opinion about beauty or vulnerability or majesty, you know, you call every emotion that you can say about looks, you know, was maybe opposite of the taste of people in the city in Shanghai, you know. So that was also a quest, you know. The casting, I think, was the most difficult, together with communicate about the emotions, you know, because many, me as a Western person, and many of my friends and people around me, you know, we have, as we say, so our heart on our tongue, you know. So if we say everything, if we are unhappy or happy or emotional, we cry, we do everything, which is totally different in a culture as I met in China, in Shanghai. So that was for me a big discovering and searching and looking, you know, what does this mean? What can I ask? What can I not ask? Very, very interesting, you know, because the body language, what I talked about just before, you know, that I wanted to photograph is slightly different, but very important different in Asia or in China, and maybe also in Taiwan, than in the Netherlands and Europe.
Well, in the exhibition here, in one of the galleries, you put the Palm Springs and Shanghai in the same big area. But right
Yes.
in the center, there is this prominent installation of 10 videos, vertical
Yeah.
videos of. I'm sorry, I don't have an image here, but I assume that the audience have already seen the show. So there are 10 vertical videos, and with 5 women each from each of the series, and I wonder if you can tell us more about these videos and this particular way of installation. But what I'm more curious about is, in one of your interviews, you mentioned that you used to be more critical of your female actors. But I'm wondering, because you have particularly chosen these female roles, these characters, instead of men, I'm wondering, while you're being critical, on the one hand, you said you're critical of your female actors, but at the same time, do you kind of empathize or sympathize with certain female qualities?
Of course, that is,
What
you
are
know, you
those?
can be critical towards your actors if it's and your female actors, if you feel a lot of respect and adoration, you know. Yeah, I meant with saying more critical is that I can push a little bit more. I have more the emotion of going together to the grade of perfection I'm looking for, you know, because there's no sexual component in my friendship or in my relationship with my female actors or actresses, you know, because so let's say when I direct a boy or a man and I'm a little bit attracted to him, maybe now not anymore, but 10 years ago for certain, I will be maybe a little less critical because I think he's attractive. And with the woman, I can see she's very attractive, but there's no sexual component. So I can say to her, can you do it one more time? Can you do it a little bit like this or that, you know? So I'm going for the higher grade of perfection with them. And I have the idea that with female actors, you know, they understand more, a little bit more, what I want to express and where I want them to dig in their own memories or emotions to express themselves. And the whole idea that you can see very well, I think, in the video works of Shanghai and also of Palm Springs, but a little bit. I'm really very happy with the Shanghai videos, and they were inspired on the outdoor advertising that I saw in Shanghai when I visited the first few times, because photography was totally not visible in outside advertising anymore in big parts of Shanghai. You only saw screens with very short videos with advertisement. And that gave me the idea to make those individual moving portraits of the Shanghai women. And I wanted them to express in one short sentence a question to who was watching. Look at me, love me, you know, things like that. Because it was a kind of relationship also with the whole advertising. But meanwhile, expressing something that is very essential for all individuals in the world, you know, and being part of a huge group of 20 million people at that moment. So the individual emotions can be crushed, let's say so, in a big city like that. So that is what gave me the idea. But the outdoor advertising was the big start of it.
Okay. So while we're on the topic of video work, I have a very quick question about the moving image, the way you use moving images in your work. So we see a lot of the series, you incorporate the still photography. Still photography is the main body of the work, but you also often add this a short video. And in these videos, they are very, very slow in pace. And then, but they're not really slow motion videos or even time lapse, excluding the still life flower one. But so I was wondering, what role does video work play in your work? Is it an expansion of photography, or is it like more like a footnote or a supplement of the narratives of your still life image or your still images?
That's an interesting question. For me, it is also part of a research. How far can you go with photography? And how far can you go with video to come close, those two techniques to get them closer to each other? For instance, the series Waiting. I photographed and filmed also and made a movie of 45 minutes, which is really based on, let's say, intellectual video art. How long can you teach your audience? When does film come close to photography? It's a question, it's a riddle. I want to research, I want to analyze, So this, and then it starts, let's say, also again a dialogue with the photography. So it fills in, it adds to, let's say, to a series as Shanghai or Palm Springs, or to a photo series like Waiting. It adds up. It gives more depth and more dimension.
Okay, thank you. I think we should quickly move on to Imwald, one of your latest works in the exhibition. So, Imwald. So this large-scale black and white photography is quite different from your other works in the exhibition. And these images, they really invoke the tradition of landscape photography, and at the same time, the spirit of 19th century romantic paintings. And both these, they, in art history, they often touch upon this idea of the sublime, which, like, in the face of nature, men are reminded of their own humanity and their vulnerability and their moral strength, perhaps. And I was wondering if this kind of wraps up your theme. You seem to have a theme that talks about human frailty. And so for me, it kind of wraps up this theme of human frailty. But I was wondering if there's other messages that you want to send to the audience through this body of work.
Well, the Imwald series I made because I was invited for an exhibition in Munich, and they asked me in the Kunsthalle if I could make something new, and they thought they had an idea to bring me to the castle of Ludwig II, one of the Mad King. Maybe you know him of Byron, the last king. But I didn't want to touch that subject, and I got not inspired by that. But what was so interesting, on my way to one of his secret castles, I was hit enormously, really enormously, by the overwhelming beauty of nature in the south part of Germany. And of course, I went already for years, let's say, to German museums, and the difference with the Dutch museums of historic paintings is that we have our highlight in, let's say, the golden century, the 17th century, but Germany had a highlight in the 19th century, and there was a lot of landscapes painting and romantic painting, which I did not understand completely till that travel, till I went in the woods of Byron, because it all came together. And I was already for a year or two thinking about, let's say, being worried and feeling unhappy about the direction our world is going. with our nature, you know, and the arrogance of human beings, all of us, you know, towards nature, you know, we think we own it, and then the arrogance, you know, if you see the individual opposite this power of nature and this non-emotion of nature, you know, the waterfall doesn't have any emotion, you know, and we think it's beautiful or great or fantastic, but we want to swim in it and we want to own it, you know. And I want to do something with that. And the second storyline, let's say, was about the growing population of human beings, and therefore the traveling we do all over the world. Everybody is traveling and settling down everywhere. You know, if you are an expat or if you are a refugee, if you are fleeing for war, if you want to look for a better future, you know, but 8 billion people are getting everywhere, you know, and more or less, I think that we human beings are a plague, and in a way, I wanted to do something with that, you know. So that was the starting point: the traveling and our arrogance towards this majestic nature.
Okay, thank you. So I want to bring us back a little bit. Unfortunately, I don't have an image for this particular piece, but I want to speak a little bit about Keyhole, the installation. Yes. So I think all the visitors are very intrigued by this particular installation, Keyhole. It really stands out because it's not only an installation, it takes up this space, it's also interactive. People have to like really look into the keyhole to see the movie that is going on inside, and then there are 2 different movies that are playing on each side, and it kind of provokes this certain imagination and provokes certain emotions. But some people might say that it's a little bit voyeuristic, and the subject itself of the film is a little bit sensitive in a way. I was wondering if you purposefully created this gray area to invoke this certain mindset behind the act of viewing.
Yes, absolutely. That was on forehand the meaning of it, you know, because imagine I made first photographs, you know, and the photographs started out with the little boy looking through the keyhole, because he was doing that on the set when I was preparing a photograph, and I loved what he was doing because he was looking from his own world into another world, you know, which we sometimes do, you know, and that was for me an important movement. He turned away from the camera and looked in the keyhole, looking from his own world in the world of another. And this was for me the starting point. I was already busy with that because it had a little bit to do with our overpopulation as well, that the more people we are, the less we know about each other. We live in big cities, in apartment buildings, and our private life is just divided by thin walls. But we don't know anything about our neighbors anymore, you know. So it's most of the people are nowadays living in cities and anonymous. So we're peeping from the one world to the other world. That was one starting point. And the other thing is that we are very judgmental, more and more, you know. So we see or we hear just a little part of something, and then we start to create our own stories, and we are judgmental, and we say, oh, he's wrong or she's wrong, you know. And what I wanted to do with the 2 films was to make you a voyeur, that you have to look into the other world, and then you see something that's not fully clear, you know. So I asked and it was a very touchy subject, you know, especially, I don't know in your country, but in the Western world, you know, let's say grown-ups with children in private atmosphere. So I invited an actor and an actress to do exactly the same with the little boy, with the young boy. You just caressing it, you know, being friendly. And then, but we nearly don't see what they are doing, and we certainly don't hear what they are saying because you only hear mumbling, you know. But our brain starts to make conclusions, you know. And those conclude because I make them all day, you know. Every time I read only a little piece in the paper, and I know already what I think. So that is, let's say, the discussion I wanted to start with the installation, you know. What do you see? What is going on, you know? And with one story, you go to the negative way of thinking, and with the other story, you go to the positive way of thinking, which is really interesting because the situations change only man, female, and bedroom, living room. You know, those two elements can add up into horror stories or stories of, now let's say, being friendly.
Okay, thank you. I think that answers to some questions from the audience. And so I was reminded of the time that we have left, and I was wondering if we should open up to the floor here and see if there are any live audiences who want to ask Urban any questions. Maybe is that possible? 3, we can have 3.
我们现场提供3个问题的机会，有没有观众有问题想要跟 Mr. Olaf 亲自的来对谈一下？
Okay.
Hi. Okay. Thank you for all your sharing.
That's 0.
Yeah. But I will speak my question in Mandarin and later maybe repeat in English again. 所以谢谢就是孟真还有 Shirley 还有艾文的分享。那我问一个简单的问题，那尤其是刚刚有提到关于 scale 的问题，就是关于相片的尺寸。那搞不好 Shirley 可以回答这个问题，就是因为financial concern， 所以除了 financial concern 之外，照片的大小，因为在柏林那个系列，其实有2张照片是一样的，但是一张是比较小，一张比较大，一个女孩坐在椅子上的照片。那这个的动机，在俄文的创作里，摄影的大小它是一个很重要的事情嘛。So yeah, for Shirley, sorry, I can repeat my question again. So I just wonder the scale of photography in Erwin's creation, especially in Berlin series. There's a girl sitting on a chair, and I think they are the same image but different scale. So for the scale, especially in this new world, in world, this all big scale. So for Erwin, the scale of photography is important, or yeah.
Because the question is does size matter in the photography, and then especially comparing the in world extra large comparison with there's also one carbon print of Berlin. Just why do you choose the several formats in your work?
Okay. Well, let's say in Wald, I knew from the beginning it has to be huge, you know, because I want you as a viewer to feel the overwhelming power of the nature as I felt it when we were photographing it, you know. So therefore, a big prints with a majestic framing, also to refer to the big paintings, you know. And with the Berlin, the common printing is really very difficult, I think, and very you need a lot of patience, but it is a very rich process, hand printed, you know, 19th century technique, but you cannot go big on it. So it's and I think it looks much better when it's small, because you feel it like a little diamond, you know. It looks like a jewelry, but also what my, let's say a little bit my quest is, when you go to a museum and you see a photo exhibition, you see a kind of uniformity in size and also in framing, which is partly a financial question. But if you go to a museum for a painting exhibition, an exhibition of painted art, then you see every painting has its own size. And I think, why are we as photographers not more interested in let's say, the power of the size? Sometimes you want to communicate something, a message on a small scale. Sometimes you need a big scale. Sometimes you need huge frames. Sometimes you need very small frames to add to what you want to tell.
Irvin 的作品有一个2020年的愚人节系列，然后呢，他让我联想到的是，希特勒对那个犹太人在威玛政权之后的那无差别的杀戮。可是呢，疫情的期间，细菌那些 COVID-19 的那些疫情对所有人类都是无差别的侵袭。我会把这个作品联想在一起，而且它取名叫愚人节。可是希特勒在演讲的时候被抓进监狱里面去，就是愚人节这一天被抓的。我想这个是不是有一些连结？这是我个人的想法，谢谢。
Yes, the question is.
Yeah. Well, Hitler was not put in prisoner. He committed suicide the last days of the war. So that I have to correct you. No, but I don't think, and the whole, I don't know what you mean, because I never think about a person like Adolf Hitler, It's a difficult question for me to answer. I don't understand it completely.
Well, I think she just said that it kind of reminds her of the Holocaust and the act of killing. Okay, the act of killing, because killing in the Holocaust, it's like a massive killing and killed a lot of people, but COVID-19 also killed a lot of people. And then the Hitler's death, no matter how maybe historically the fact was wrong, but the death of Hitler was on April 1st. So there is this.
Okay.
This
no,
coincidence.
Didn't have anything to do. I choose the title April Fool because I thought we as human beings were fooling ourselves, by thinking for years that a tragedy like the COVID-19 would not ever happen to us, And there we were at a certain moment. Within 3 months, the whole world had changed. I still remember there was a small article in the paper when I was on holiday, about 3 lines, saying something about the virus in China. And every day, this news was getting a tiny bit bigger and bigger and bigger. And the third, and I was reading it on my holiday destination in Thailand. And every day it was growing and growing. And then I think a few days before, a week before the lockdown, or 10 days, we arrived home, and it was getting now not 3 lines in the paper, but 2 pages and 3 pages and 4, And then there was, there was this lockdown. Everybody had to sit at home. Nobody was allowed to move anymore, And it was, we photographed on, Shirley helped me, on Thursday or Friday, and Saturday the lockdown was there. Or it was the day after the lockdown.
It was after the lockdown we shot.
Yeah. So it was the guerrilla kind of photography. And I wanted just to express, the shock I was in, because this was an emotion. a worldwide emotion as far as I could see that I never felt or saw in my life before. And I wanted to do something with our collective stupidity and me as an individual reacting on all those events happening around me and not knowing what to do with it. Because I have a lung disease, I was extra panicking and afraid, because I got the idea and I knew exactly how to photograph it. At the moment, I was in a supermarket and hundreds of people around me were grabbing for food and shopping and doing things. And because when you have a lung disease, you are rather vulnerable because everybody wins. Power is more powerful than yourself. So I was kind of paralyzed in the shop, waiting till my breath was getting normal again. And then I realized that I could be blown away in 1 second. And that I wanted to visualize.
那我最大的感想是觉得，我今天来看这些照片，我觉得我看到好像是最有吸引力的部分，好像是没有电影的剧照这一部分，这是我自己的心得。而这个剧照本身不是瞬间的纪实摄影那样的快，也不是有完足情节的电影、线性的电影那样子，而是有一个好像失去时间的一个空间，包括选角、家具、色彩，还有整个照片的形式的完整度，都很精准的投向观众，然后让我就是投入到这个照片本身，在没有时间的状况下，让自己的想象力飞腾，连接到就是你的关心的议题、人类的境况、希望、沮丧、疏离等等。谢谢你。
I see it as a big compliment.
So is there any, okay, we have...
Well, what I want to say about that, a little bit, and then we should, I keep my mouth shut. But many of my inspiration, or let's say, my background is the world of the movie industry, and especially of when I was younger and going on my own to the cinema and watch those beautiful movies of Visconti and also the other Italian directors, the German cinema in the 80s, and the United States movies in the 50s. So there's certainly a connection with movies.
Okay. 好的，那我们非常感谢今天Mr. Olaf 给我们大家带来的分享。那我们再次热烈掌声感谢 Mr. Olaf。
Thank you very much.